Hey everybody, I made it to Gatlinburg, Tennessee. I'm currently about halfway through the Smoky Mountains, so I decided I'm going to go ahead and take this opportunity to get you updated. It's been a while since I have, so this update's going to cover from Franklin, North Carolina into Fontana Dam. On day 22, the plan was to go from Rock Gap to Moore Creek campsite, which was just a few miles in. And in my last video, I had mentioned that the 20 miles or so leading into Rock Gap was really mild terrain. And I've got to admit, that's pretty much where the mild terrain stopped. The trail pretty much immediately started getting steep again right when we got back into Rock Gap. It was good hiking. It was kind of wet that day. We got really lucky. We were actually leaving a hostel, getting ready to head to the trail, and randomly an older guy had pulled up in his Jeep and wanted to know if we needed a ride back to the trailhead. So, of course, we took advantage of that situation, and he got us back. On day 23, we went from the Moore Creek campsites to the Meadow campsite. So just kind of a random campsite that's on the trail. It was actually a really nice campsite, but the day was pretty uneventful. We had pretty patchy fog, so there wasn't a whole lot of views, but it was still a good day of hiking. On day 24, I hiked from the Meadow campsite to Cold Spring Shelter. On that day, it started off pretty foggy, and we were a little worried because that's the day we were going to go up to Wesser Bald, which is known to have some pretty views. And luckily, by the time we got there, the fog had started to lift, and the view is just spectacular up there. The tower that's up there has actually been damaged pretty bad by fire. However, you're still able to get into the top and take advantage of those beautiful views. If you happen to be coming up on the trail behind me, something that you should know about Wesser Bald, as soon as you come up to the pavement where there's basically a walkway up to the Wesser Bald Tower, if you look to your right, there's actually some bathrooms. Walked up there, those bathrooms were unlocked, they were clean, and on the trail, having real bathrooms, that's the best trail magic you can get. So on day 25, we went from Cold Spring Shelter to the NOC, which is the Nantahala Outdoor Center. Along the way, we actually crossed Tellico Gap right before we climbed up to Wesser Bald. And amazingly enough, somebody had left their truck open with homemade cookies in it, and there was also a cooler full of Coca-Cola. So whoever you are, thank you so much for leaving that there. Stuck Norris and I definitely appreciate it, and we probably wouldn't have been able to climb up to Wesser Bald without it because that was an extremely steep climb. And speaking of Stuck Norris, that's Andy's trail name. He's the guy one of the guys from Indiana that I met back at the shelter on the very first day on the Appalachian Trail. He has earned the trail name Stuck Norris. I'll eventually get him to tell you how he earned that trail name. But him and I are still hiking together, and we've been having a great time. So the climb from Tellico Gap up to Wesser Bald was pretty steep. Again, luckily we had those cookies and Coke to fuel us up, but right before we came down into Tellico Gap, I had seen Andy had pulled off the trail to use the restroom, and he had left his pack open, which is a bad idea with me behind him, and so I decided to have a little bit of fun with him, and he got to carry a little something extra up to Wesser Bald. That was pretty hard, huh? Now that we're up here, you should probably check the contents of your pack. Just open her up.
What did you do? Did you put a rock in it?
Just open her up.
Where? Where's it at? You're getting there. I thought it felt heavy.
Oh, man. So once you get up to the top of Wesser Bald, that's where you start to descend into the NOC. That is a pretty intense descent. The very beginning of it's extremely steep. There's a little section called the jump off, which had a beautiful view, but it was literally in certain sections there was a 4-foot drop off that you'd just have to negotiate your way down. After that, it wasn't all that bad of a descent. It was just extremely long. It was about a 6-mile descent, so it's pretty taxing on the knees. So about a mile away from the NOC, I could start smelling food. Luckily, there's a restaurant down right on the water at the NOC, right where the trail crosses. So, you know, that last mile, it was pretty easy to get down there. We had the smell of food as motivation, and it's a good restaurant. I highly recommend their burgers. So the NOC is a really cool place, at least it is in my opinion. I really enjoyed myself there, and it was pretty reasonably priced for lodging. It was about 20 bucks a night for a bunk. They have a little area that they call base camp bunkhouses, and there's several bunkhouses together. They're really clean. They're really basic. You know, you have a shared bathroom and things like that. But you know, for 20 bucks a night, it was great. We ended up staying a couple nights because we ran into quite a few friends while we were there. So on day 28, we went from the NOC to Cheoah Bald, which is the climb basically out of the NOC. To date, that's the longest climb that we've done. It's definitely not the steepest, but it goes on for several miles. It's something like 8 miles from the NOC, which is down in the Nantahala Gorge, clear up to Cheoah Bald, which has beautiful views. We initially were going to stop at Sassafras Gap that night, and I'm glad we pushed on to Cheoah Bald because it's definitely, to date, the most beautiful camp spot that we've had. About 2/3 of the way up the climb, there's a little overlook, and it's called the Jump Up, and it's got beautiful views down into the Nantahala Gorge. Well, at the water source just before that, I had run into a British fella. His name was Clunk, and he gave me some pretty amazing trail magic. We just got to talking up there as we're enjoying the view, and he asked me, "Hey, do you want a beer?" You know, of course I want a beer. You know, I'd been climbing all morning. So he said, hey, you know, he turned himself around. He said, hey, man, grab one out of my pack. And he had packed 2 beers up. And amazingly enough, he gave me one. I got to say, this is probably my favorite trail magic I've gotten so far. On day 29, we traveled from the amazing campsite up on top of Cheoah Bald to Brown Fork Gap. When we got to Stokoa Gap, which was, it's basically a gap just before you climb what's called Jacob's Ladder. Let me talk about Jacob's Ladder real quick. It's the most steep climb that we've done so far. It's certainly not the longest. It's about 6/10 of a mile long. There's no way video was going to do it any justice. If you want to know what it was like to climb that, several miles into our day hiking the AT, the best way I can describe it, going on grade and things like that, is if you were to climb a staircase that was 30% or so more steep than a standard staircase would be, and then climb to the top of a 60-story building on that staircase, that would be pretty much the equivalent of climbing up Jacob's Ladder. I've heard people talk about their switchbacks in it. There was only switchbacks probably the last tenth of a mile. Definitely the beginning of it was straight up the mountain. The only time it actually turned was basically to avoid big trees and things like that. But it was definitely a pretty intense climb. Luckily it didn't go on for very long. It only went on for about 6/10 of a mile. Now, when we got into Cheoah Gap, luckily there was a couple there named Connie and Bruce from Tennessee who do trail magic every year. I got to give them a major shout out. That was amazing, coming down a very long descent down into Cheoah Gap, knowing that we had Jacob's Ladder ahead of us, to get there and see that they had amazing trail magic set up. They had pulled pork barbecue, hot dogs, peanut butter and jelly, Cokes, candy. I mean, everything you would imagine, chips. It was very awesome. Thank you very much for doing that. All of us appreciate it so much. That's definitely what got us up and over Jacob's Ladder. On day 30, I went from Brown Fork Gap to a little stealth camp spot that was just about 2 miles shy of Fontana Dam. Stuck Norris and I both wanted to have a short day coming into Fontana Dam so that we could enjoy ourselves when we got there. And day 30 for both of us was both of our worst day on the trail, and for two different reasons. The reason that it was so difficult for me was because of the rain. It was just terrible weather all day. I do have rain gear, but you put it on and you sweat so much that you might as well not have it on. So of course I didn't have any rain gear on. I was just completely soaked. For 7 or 8 hours. It just made for a very long hike. It was really windy in certain spots and got pretty cold. Of course, when you get wet, you get, it wasn't cold, but cold enough to be uncomfortable. The reason it was the worst day on the trail for Stuck Norris is because probably about a third of the way through our day, his leg locked up on him. At first, we thought that he had just a really severe cramp, maybe low on electrolytes or something like that. And it turns out that he's most likely pulled a muscle in his quad, so it had been very painful hiking for him to get to Fontana Dam. On day 31, we just did the short descent from our stealth camp spot down into Fontana Dam. We stopped at the very first road crossing that you come to, which is NC 28. Once you get there, you're probably not going to have cell phone coverage, neither Stuck Norris or I did. But don't worry, they run shuttles pretty much, this time of year anyways, they run shuttles pretty much all day, every day. From Fontana Village down to the marina, and also from Fontana Village down to the dam where the Fontana Hilton shelter is. So you're going to be able to get on one of those shuttle buses and get a ride up for $3 per person. Fontana Dam was a really cool place in my opinion. Everybody there was really friendly to us. We really enjoyed ourselves there. It's not the cheapest place in the world to stay. However, there are a couple of good restaurants. There's beer available there. There is a general store that has some resupply. There's also a place called the Pit Stop. It's down on a corner turning into there that you can get, little microwavable food, hot dogs. They sell beer and things like that in there too. It's a really cool place. The only downside is it is a little bit spread out depending on where you're staying and within Fontana Village. It's a pretty good size resort. So Stuck Norris and I ended up renting a golf cart to get around, and that was in part to help Stuck Norris stay off of that leg that was hurting him so bad.
Fucking cruising now. I feel like I'm breaking the law somehow.
So thanks everybody for watching. If you have any questions or comments for me, feel free to put them down in the comment section. I do read those and I appreciate the encouraging ones. I'll try to address them as soon as I can if you have any questions. And stay tuned because my next update is going to be of my experience in the Smoky Mountains.